She's been a star for over 8 decades. But now, at 92, Petula Clark is revealing the hidden truths behind her legendary career. A journey filled with triumph, heartbreak, and untold stories that shaped her into the icon she is today. For years, she kept silent about the challenges she faced, the reality of her marriage, the battles she fought as a woman in the male-dominated music industry, and the harassment that lurked behind closed doors. She also made history with a simple but groundbreaking moment on live television, one that defied expectations and nearly got her show pulled from the air. And then there's Elvis Presley, the night they met, the unexpected turn of events, and what really happened when the king of rock and roll set his sights on her. Now, for the first time, she's telling it all. This is the untold story of Petula Clark, the voice of a generation, and the woman behind the music. Before she was Petula Clark, before the fame and the international hits, she was simply Sally Alwyn Clark, born in 1932 in Surrey, England. But even before she could walk, her father had bigger plans. He gave her a new name, Petula, a combination of 2 former girlfriends, a name that would soon belong to one of the most recognizable voices in the world. But Petula's childhood was far from ordinary. Her parents, both nurses, worked long hours, leaving her to spend much of her early years with her grandparents in a small Welsh mining town. There, in a smoky pub at just 7 years old, she unknowingly took her first steps toward stardom. In the middle of a crowded room filled with rugged miners, she stood up and began to sing. The chatter and the laughter faded, replaced by silence as the men listened, captivated by this little girl with the voice of an angel. That was just the beginning. 2 years later, war changed everything. Britain was in turmoil, and the BBC had launched a program to lift the spirits of soldiers stationed abroad. In 1942, at just 9 years old, Petula accompanied her father to London's underground BBC studio to record a simple voice message for her uncle, who was serving in North Africa. But that day, fate had other plans. As the recording was about to begin, air raid sirens wailed through the city. Explosions rumbled overhead as families huddled in the shelter, fear growing with every blast. The show's producer knew they needed a distraction. He asked if anyone in the crowd could perform. Petula's hand shot up. She had planned to do an impression of a famous comedian, but her father nudged her toward singing instead. Standing on a wooden box to reach the microphone, she took a deep breath and began to sing "Mighty Like a Rose." Her voice was clear, steady, cutting through the fear like a light in the darkness. The orchestra, caught in the moment, began to play along. The shelter, once tense and filled with anxiety, softened. For a few minutes, the war outside disappeared. That single performance changed everything. The broadcast went live, and almost immediately, letters poured into the BBC. Listeners demanded to hear more of the little girl with the angelic voice. Almost overnight, Petula Clark became a household name. Over the next few years, she became a regular on radio programs, performing hundreds of times across the country. By the age of 11, she had already sung for thousands of British troops, earning her the nickname Britain's Shirley Temple. She wasn't just a talented child, she had an uncanny ability to make people feel something, whether through laughter or tears. She could mimic the great singers of the time, from Vera Lynn to Sophie Tucker, making her a favorite among both soldiers and civilians. Her voice became more than just entertainment. It became a symbol of home. Soldiers carried her photo into battle, listening to her songs as a reminder of what they were fighting for. She wasn't singing in grand theaters, she was in bomb shelters, military camps, and hospital wards, bringing hope where it was needed most. Then, in 1945, as the war in Europe finally came to an end, Petula was given a moment that would cement her place in history. In the heart of London, Trafalgar Square was filled with thousands of people. It was a day of celebration. Tears, cheers, and long-awaited embraces filled the air. And in the middle of it all, Petula Clark stood on stage, singing to the nation. The little girl who had spent the war years lifting spirits now had a voice in the victory itself. And in that moment, her future as a performer was sealed. Petula Clark wasn't just a child star. She was a voice of resilience, a symbol of hope, and a performer destined for greatness. And the world had only just begun to hear her story. Petula's early brush with stardom was anything but ordinary. In 1944, while still reeling from the wonder of her first radio performances, fate introduced her to the silver screen. An unplanned discovery at one of her live shows led to her being cast in the film Medal for the General. It was an unexpected twist. A young girl with a voice that transcended her years was suddenly stepping into the realm of film. That singular chance was just the spark that ignited an extraordinary journey. Before she even reached adulthood, Petula's star was already blazing. By the time she turned 18, she had graced the screen in an astonishing 17 films. One of those early cinematic adventures was the classic I Know Where I'm Going, where her magnetic presence and undeniable talent shone through, even among seasoned performers. Each film added another layer to her growing legacy, cementing her status as a formidable talent in an industry that was just beginning to understand her potential. Yet, as her film career blossomed, music remained at the very core of her being. In the 1950s, while the world was finding its rhythm in the post-war era, Petula found her voice in song. It was then that she recorded The Little Shoemaker, a track that quickly became her first major hit. The melody captured the hearts of a generation, setting the stage for a musical career that would span continents and languages. As the decade unfolded, so did her musical ambitions. Petula wasn't content with singing only in English. Driven by an insatiable desire to reach every corner of the globe, she began recording songs in multiple languages: English, French, German, Italian, and even Japanese. Each new language was a doorway to a new audience, a new connection with fans far beyond the borders of her native Britain. This bold, multicultural approach not only showcased her vocal versatility, but also set her apart as a true global icon, bridging cultural divides with every note. Her efforts paid off spectacularly, and one of the pivotal moments of her career came in 1962. It was in France, a country known for its discerning musical tastes, that Petula made a breakthrough with the song Chariot. The track resonated deeply with French audiences, capturing both the emotion and the spirit of the times. The success of Chariot was more than just a hit. It was an accolade that brought her the prestigious Grand Prix du Disque, an award that acknowledged her immense talent and her ability to cross not just linguistic, but cultural barriers. Every step of her journey, from the accidental film debut to the multilingual masterpieces that followed, told the story of a woman who defied expectations. Petula Clark was not merely a child star. She was a phenomenon whose early start in film and music laid the groundwork for an international legacy. Her career during these formative years was a blend of spontaneity and deliberate reinvention, a journey that saw her evolve from a young girl singing in smoky pubs to a global sensation whose voice became synonymous with hope, resilience, and innovation. In those transformative years, Petula transformed each challenge into an opportunity. Her ability to adapt, whether by switching languages or by stepping into roles that demanded more than just a pretty face, allowed her to capture hearts all over the world. With every film and every song, she demonstrated that true artistry knows no boundaries, geographical, linguistic, or otherwise. And it was this very spirit that propelled her from being a beloved child star to a revered international icon. Her story is a reminder that sometimes the most remarkable journeys begin with a single unforeseen moment. A performance in a small venue, a chance casting in a film, or a hit record that defies expectations. For Petula Clark, each of these moments was a stepping stone toward a career that would leave an indelible mark on the world of entertainment. And as she continued to sing and act, she not only won awards and accolades, but also the hearts of millions, forever changing the landscape of popular culture. Some songs are destined to be hits, but not everyone recognizes their potential at first. For Petula Clark, the song that would define her career, Downtown, was almost the one that got away. It all started in 1964, when Tony Hatch, a talented songwriter and producer, played her a melody he had been working on. He believed it had something special, a spark that could ignite the charts. But Petula wasn't convinced. The lyrics seemed too simple, almost unfinished, and she wasn't sure it suited her style. At that time, she was already a well-established star in Europe, known for sophisticated French ballads and polished performances. A bright, bouncy pop song about city life? It wasn't what she had in mind. Still, Hatch was persistent, convinced Downtown had something magic hidden beneath its straightforward lyrics. He pushed for her to record it, assuring her it would be different from anything she had done before. Reluctantly, Petula agreed to give it a shot. But when the recording session began on October 16, 1964, everything seemed to go wrong. The studio was plagued by technical difficulties. The power flickered on and off, forcing delays. The musicians, frustrated by the interruptions, struggled to keep the energy alive. The mood in the room turned tense. Petula, known for her professionalism, started losing patience. At one point, she considered walking out, convinced the song just wasn't meant to be. But then, something changed. In the final moments before the session ended, everything clicked. Petula delivered a performance that captured something electric, a blend of optimism, sophistication, and effortless cool. With its soaring melody, lush orchestration, and her crystal-clear vocals, Downtown came to life in a way no one had quite expected. When the track was finally mixed and released on November 16, 1964, it was clear something extraordinary was happening. Unlike most British hits of the time, Downtown wasn't just launched in the UK, it was released simultaneously in multiple countries, an unusual move for the era. At first, the response was promising but not earth-shattering. In the US, it entered the Billboard Hot 100 at number 87. A respectable debut, but nothing to suggest what was about to happen next. Within weeks, the song exploded. Radio stations couldn't get enough of it. Audiences were captivated by its energy, its grandeur, and the way it captured the excitement of city life. It climbed the charts at lightning speed. And on January 23, 1965, Downtown reached number 1 on the US Billboard Hot 100, making Petula Clark the first British woman in history to top the American charts during the rock and roll era. Back in the UK, the song reached number 2, held back only by The Beatles' I Feel Fine. But even that couldn't stop Downtown from becoming an international sensation. It dominated charts in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Germany, turning Petula into a global star overnight. Winning a Grammy Award for Best Rock and Roll Recording, the song was a game-changer. At a time when British music was defined by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, Petula Clark carved out her own lane. A sophisticated pop star with crossover appeal that resonated across generations. And Downtown was just the beginning. Between 1964 and 1968, she achieved something few artists ever do: 15 consecutive top 40 hits in the United States. Songs like I Know a Place, My Love, and Don't Sleep in the Subway kept her at the top of the charts, proving that she wasn't just a one-hit wonder, she was a force to be reckoned with. From doubt to superstardom, Downtown wasn't just a song, it was the turning point. It transformed Petula Clark from a European success into an international icon, cementing her place in music history. And what started as just another track pitched by a hopeful songwriter became one of the most defining anthems of the 1960s, a song that still resonates today. By the late 1960s, Petula Clark was already a global music sensation. But what no one expected, including her, was that Hollywood would come calling. Her leap into acting on the silver screen was never part of the plan. Yet, in 1968, she found herself cast in Finian's Rainbow, a whimsical musical fantasy that paired her with none other than Fred Astaire, a legend of the golden age of cinema. The film, directed by a young Francis Ford Coppola, was a major studio project, and Petula, despite her experience in European cinema, was stepping into a whole new world. The role of Sharon McLonergan, an Irish woman caught in a magical tale of gold, wishes, and mistaken identities, showcased her charm, wit, and warmth. Sharing the screen with Fred Astaire was both intimidating and exhilarating. After all, she had grown up watching him on film. But Petula held her own, proving she was more than just a singer. Critics praised her performance, but audiences were lukewarm, and the film didn't achieve the success the studio had hoped for. However, it had one lasting effect. It cemented Petula as a serious actress, opening the door for what came next. In 1969, she took on a far more dramatic role in Goodbye, Mr. Chips, a reimagining of the 1939 classic. This time, she wasn't playing a fairy tale heroine. She was Catherine Bridges, a charismatic, free-spirited woman who brings light into the life of a reserved schoolteacher, played by Peter O'Toole. This wasn't just another musical. It was an emotional, deeply layered performance, one that earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy. While Peter O'Toole dominated the film's critical acclaim, Petula's performance was recognized as one of the highlights of the movie, proving that she was not just a singer-turned-actress, but a true performer. But Petula Clark's journey on stage wasn't over, not by a long shot. By the 1980s, many artists in her position might have slowed down. But instead, at 48 years old, she did something remarkable. She made her Broadway debut. And not just in any role, she took on Maria von Trapp in The Sound of Music. Taking on the part made famous by Julie Andrews was a daunting challenge, especially for an actress in her late 40s, an age when the role was traditionally played by much younger performers. But Petula brought something different, a depth of experience and a presence that made her Maria more than just a bright-eyed governess. She performed 8 shows a week, an exhausting schedule even for younger stars, but she tackled it with her signature professionalism and passion. Audiences embraced her, and she remained in the production for an incredible 15 months, proving that she could command a live audience just as effortlessly as she could a recording studio. Then, in the 1990s, she took on her most ambitious theatrical role yet, one that would push her limits and redefine her career once again. At 62 years old, Petula Clark was cast as Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, one of the most demanding and iconic roles in musical theater. Norma, a once glamorous silent film star trapped in a world of faded dreams, was a role that required intensity, vulnerability, and sheer dramatic power. Most actresses who played Norma were younger, in their 50s, but Petula defied expectations. When she joined the U.S. national tour, audiences were stunned. Her interpretation of Norma was both grand and tragic, capturing the character's desperation and faded glory with an authenticity that only someone with her life experience could bring. The tour lasted 56 weeks, covering 23 cities, and Petula's performance was so well received that she was invited to reprise the role in London's West End in 1997. By then, she was the oldest actress to ever play Norma Desmond, performing over 600 shows, a staggering feat that required both vocal and emotional endurance. Even after decades in the spotlight, she refused to be confined to a single role, a single genre, or a single era. Whether on stage, on screen, or behind a microphone, Petula Clark had proven that reinvention was the key to longevity. While others faded away, she only grew stronger, more fearless, and more willing to take on challenges that many would shy away from. And even as the years passed, she wasn't finished yet. There were still more stages to conquer, more records to break, and more audiences to captivate. In 1968, Petula Clark was at the height of her fame, dominating the music charts and making her mark on the international stage. But she was about to make history in a way no one could have predicted. Not through music, but with a simple, unscripted gesture on live television. That year, she was set to headline her NBC television special, a variety show filled with musical performances and star-studded collaborations. One of her featured guests was Harry Belafonte, the legendary singer, actor, and civil rights activist. Together, they were set to perform On the Path of Glory, an anti-war ballad that carried an emotional message about peace and unity. During rehearsals, everything had gone smoothly. But when the cameras rolled, something happened. Something completely unplanned, yet deeply powerful. As they sang, Petula, moved by the moment, reached out and gently placed her hand on Harry Belafonte's arm. It was a simple, human gesture, a sign of connection between two artists pouring their emotions into a song. But in 1968 America, that moment was explosive. At the time, interracial physical contact on television was practically unheard of, and the civil rights movement was still fighting against deeply ingrained racial divides. In fact, in 17 states, interracial marriage was still illegal. Watching the broadcast from the control room was Doyle Lott, an executive from Chrysler, the company sponsoring the special. The moment he saw Clark's hand touch Belafonte's arm, he was outraged. He didn't see it as an innocent moment of artistic expression. He saw it as a threat to business. He immediately demanded that the performance be reshot, insisting that the scene be edited to remove any physical contact. His fear? That viewers in the South would be offended, leading to boycotts of Chrysler vehicles? But Petula wasn't about to let a corporate executive erase an important moment. She knew exactly what was at stake, and so did her husband, Claude Wolfe, who also happened to be her manager. Together, they made a bold and unprecedented decision. They destroyed every alternate take of the performance. Every version that didn't include the moment of physical contact was erased, ensuring that the only option NBC had was to air the original, unedited footage. It was a high-stakes move. Petula was at the peak of her career in the U.S., and openly defying a major corporate sponsor could have had serious consequences. But she was unwavering. If the special was going to air, it was going to air exactly as it happened, without compromise. Just a few weeks later, on April 8, 1968, at 9 p.m., the episode finally aired. But the world had changed in an instant. Only 4 days earlier, on April 4th, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. The country was in mourning, cities were erupting in protests, and racial tensions had reached a boiling point. And then, in the midst of this grief and turmoil, millions of Americans tuned in to see a white woman and a black man standing together on stage, united in song, unafraid to show a moment of human connection. The reaction was immediate and intense. NBC received thousands of letters and phone calls, some from outraged viewers who saw it as a violation of social norms, but many others praising Petula for taking a stand, whether intentional or not. Chrysler, despite its attempts to bury the moment, had lost the battle. The special aired exactly as it was meant to, and that brief touch, a mere 3.5 seconds, became a milestone in television history. It was a defining moment, not just for Petula Clark, but for American television, civil rights, and the ongoing fight for racial equality. In a world where artists were often expected to avoid controversy, she made a choice, whether consciously or instinctively, to stand her ground and let the world see something it had rarely seen before. A moment of unity that defied the barriers of race, gender, and expectation. And with just one touch, she helped change the course of history. Throughout her career, Petula Clark navigated the highs and lows of fame with grace, but behind the scenes, she found herself at the center of controversies, unexpected encounters, and personal struggles that would leave a lasting impact on her life. One of the more surprising moments came in the late 1960s, during a night out in Las Vegas. Petula and her close friend, Karen Carpenter, decided to spend an evening enjoying a performance by none other than Elvis Presley. By this point, Elvis had made his legendary comeback, reclaiming his throne as the king of rock and roll. As the show ended, an invitation was extended. Elvis wanted to meet them backstage. Curious and excited, the two singers accepted. When they walked into his dressing room, they were greeted by Elvis at his most charming, flashing that famous smile, exuding confidence, and making it clear he was interested. But who exactly was he interested in? That quickly became the question. As the conversation continued, it was obvious that Elvis was flirting, not just with Petula, but with Karen too. The situation was unusual, even amusing, as he effortlessly divided his attention between the two of them. Petula, always perceptive, sensed where things might be heading. With a quick thinking excuse, she grabbed Karen's hand and made a graceful exit before things got any more complicated. Years later, she would recall the encounter with a mix of amusement and relief, knowing that walking away was the right decision. But not every situation in Petula's career was one she could easily escape from. In 1969, she arrived in Montreal for a performance at Place des Arts, a venue she had played many times before. But this time, something was different. Tensions between English and French speakers in Quebec had reached a breaking point. Political unrest was at its peak, with groups like the Quebec Liberation Front, FLQ, making headlines with bombings and violent protests. Caught in the middle of this cultural divide, Petula, a beloved bilingual singer, found herself unknowingly walking into a battlefield of language and identity. When she sang in French, some English-speaking audience members booed. When she switched to English, the French-speaking crowd did the same. It was a no-win situation, something she had never experienced before. For an artist who had always embraced both cultures, it was heartbreaking. She had built a career on bridging gaps, bringing people together through music, and now she was being forced to confront the ugly reality of division and nationalism. But if that was an unexpected controversy, nothing could have prepared her for the firestorm that followed a simple telegram. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher became Britain's first female prime minister, a historic moment for the country. Petula, seeing it as a major step for women in leadership, sent a brief, congratulatory telegram to Thatcher. She had no idea what was about to happen next. The public assumed it was a political endorsement, rather than a simple acknowledgement of history. Almost instantly, she found herself in the middle of a backlash she never anticipated. Fans turned against her. Hate mail flooded in. Some radio stations stopped playing her music. Invitations to major events suddenly disappeared. She tried to explain she wasn't making a political statement, just recognizing a moment in history. But once people made up their minds, the damage was already done. Even years later, the controversy lingered, serving as a harsh reminder of how even the smallest gesture can be misinterpreted in the world of fame. Yet, through all these challenges, there was one battle Petula fought in silence for decades. A battle against harassment, inequality, and the darker side of the entertainment industry. Starting in the 1950s, she experienced firsthand the unspoken rules of being a woman in show business. She was underpaid compared to male artists, passed over for roles she deserved, and told to look pretty and not make trouble. But the worst experiences came behind closed doors. In 1965, at the peak of her career, a powerful producer invited her to his hotel room under the pretense of discussing an upcoming project. She walked in, believing it was a business meeting. But it quickly became clear that wasn't the case. Realizing the danger of the situation, she managed to get out before anything happened. But speaking out at the time? That wasn't an option. In an industry dominated by men, challenging power meant risking everything. For decades, she kept silent, like so many other women in entertainment. But as times changed, so did the conversation. In 2018, Petula finally opened up about what she had endured, speaking in support of the Me Too movement and sharing her own experiences in interviews and documentaries. She made it clear, while progress has been made, the fight for true equality in the entertainment industry is far from over. Through all of these moments, the controversies, the personal battles, the hidden struggles, one thing remained constant: Petula Clark's resilience. She refused to be defined by the obstacles she faced. Instead, she used them as fuel to keep going, keep singing, and keep making history. For all the fame, the accolades, and the moments that shaped history, Petula Clark's most defining relationship was the one she shared with Claude Wolfe, the man who was not only her husband, but also her manager, business partner, and closest confidant. Their story began in 1961, when Petula met Claude at Vogue Records in France. She was already a star in the UK, but France had embraced her in a way that no other country had. Claude, a French publicist, was assigned to help manage her career there. What started as a professional relationship quickly turned into something more. By the end of that same year, they were married. It was a whirlwind romance, one that seemed like the perfect blend of love and business. Together, they built Petula's international career, with Claude playing a key role behind the scenes, ensuring her success in both English and French-speaking markets. But while their professional partnership flourished, their personal relationship evolved in unexpected ways. For decades, Petula and Claude remained legally married, yet they were no longer a traditional couple. In later years, she quietly revealed the truth. They had spent much of their marriage living separate lives. They were still deeply connected, still worked together, and still shared a family. But the romantic part of their relationship had faded over time. Unlike most high-profile couples, they chose not to divorce. Instead, they built a new kind of partnership, one rooted in respect, shared history, and an unbreakable bond that went far beyond romance. While the public saw a strong, successful woman, behind the scenes, Petula struggled with one of the greatest challenges of her life: motherhood. She and Claude had 3 children: Barbara, born in 1961, Catherine in 1963, and Patrick in 1972. But balancing a family with an international career was never easy. The constant touring, the recording sessions, the long months away, it all took its toll. Petula was torn between two worlds. She wanted to be there for her children, to watch them grow, to be a present and devoted mother. But at the same time, she was one of the most in-demand performers of her era, and walking away from her career was never an option. She tried to make it work. When performing in Las Vegas, she would take the last possible flight out of Geneva, where she and Claude had made their home, just to spend a few extra hours with her kids. After the shows, instead of staying to network or enjoy the nightlife, she would take the earliest flight back, exhausted but determined to be there. But no matter how much she tried to balance it all, the guilt never left her. Even as her children reassured her in later years that she had been a good mother, the regret lingered. "I do still feel guilty about not being the perfect mother," she once admitted, "and probably always will." Then, in 2024, after 63 years of marriage, Claude Wolfe passed away at the age of 93. Though they had spent much of their later years apart in a traditional sense, his loss was devastating. He had been there for every major milestone in her career, guiding, supporting, and ensuring that her legacy endured. In a heartfelt message to her fans, Petula described the grief as overwhelming. She had lost more than just a partner. She had lost the one person who had been there from the very beginning, the one who understood her career, her struggles, and the sacrifices they had both made. Through it all, Petula Clark remained a woman of extraordinary resilience, a trailblazer in music, a history maker in entertainment, and a woman who, despite the challenges of love, loss, and family, never stopped moving forward. Even in grief, even in regret, she continued to sing, perform, and embrace life with the same passion that made her a legend. For most artists, a career spanning decades is an achievement. For Petula Clark, it's simply who she is. Through every era, every shift in music and culture, she has never stopped creating, never stopped evolving. And even as she entered her 80s, she refused to slow down. In 2017, at the age of 84, she did something almost unheard of. She released her 48th studio album, Living for Today. While most artists from her generation had long retired, Petula was still recording, still pushing herself to explore new sounds. The album featured a mix of originals and covers, including a powerful rendition of Steve Winwood's Higher Love. Her voice, still rich and unmistakable, carried the same warmth and depth that had captivated audiences for decades. But she didn't just stop at an album. In 2018, at 85 years old, she embarked on a 53-date U.S. tour, a grueling schedule even for artists half her age. She performed 90-minute sets with no intermission, proving that not only was she still a musical force, but she was as committed to her craft as she had ever been. Fans who had first seen her in the 1960s now brought their children and grandchildren to witness her perform live. And when she took the stage, there was no doubt. Petula Clark was still every bit the star she had always been. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about her isn't just her longevity. It's the way she has remained relevant, seamlessly adapting to each new phase of the industry while staying true to herself. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she never became just a nostalgia act. She continued to write, record, and perform, proving time and again that music has no expiration date. As she approaches her mid-90s, Petula Clark's impact on music, film, and theater remains undeniable. She has conquered the world of chart-topping pop hits, she has graced the silver screen, she has commanded the Broadway and West End stages, And she has broken barriers in television history. Few artists can claim such a wide-reaching and groundbreaking legacy. But through it all, through the fame, the challenges, the triumphs and setbacks, she has always been one thing above all else: an artist, through and through. Few artists in history have conquered so many worlds: film, music, theater, while breaking barriers along the way. And at 92, Petula Clark is still proving she's unstoppable.